Charles Firth, thanks for joining us over the bonnet.
Yeah, nice to see you, Mark.
You're a comedian of fairly high standing in the community. What kicked it all off?
No, I'd have to stop you there. You've obviously done your research wrong. I'm a comedian of incredibly low standing. Let's get that quite clear.
Have you always been funny?
I don't know whether always, but I certainly by about year five, I started being the guy who would sit up the back of the class and make people laugh. I don't know why. My parents divorced in that year, and I think it was a way of self-soothing or something like that. Because one of the things that I've realised as I go through life is I don't think I'm trying to necessarily impress anyone else with my jokes. I think I'm just doing it mainly to make myself laugh. That's what all my friends always say is that I'm like, of all the people who laugh at my jokes, it's me who always laughs the longest. So I think I just enjoy telling myself jokes.
So what makes you laugh?
Bathos. I think but it doesn't everyone just love a bit of bathos, which is bathos is of course the sort of it's sort of black comedy. It's when something terribly sad happens and then expectations are often fulfilled in that place. So it's just the meanest form of comedy, really, is what I when horrible things happen to people. And I think what I really enjoy is political satire, of course, but I think that's because it combines my two passions, which is I love the news and I love how the world works and how power works and everything, and taking the piss out of all the powerful people and playing that sort of role of just I think you can actually the good thing about being funny is it gives you the privileged position of being able to say a lot more than people who the professionals can say. And we have this whole idea that people who comment on politics should have a carrot up their ass, and the fact that we sit there and go, oh no, we don't have to have a carrot up our ass while we're commenting on stuff. Just it allows us to reach a much wider audience. I mean, a lot of people I know actually get a lot of their news from the Chaser website, which is appalling to think. Like, especially the younger people. They sort of go, oh, yeah, I found out about that. How'd you find out about that? Oh, I read it on the Chaser. It's like, no, don't believe that. You idiots.
Because you do enjoy just satire on the website, and nothing is off limits.
Yeah, nothing's off limits. No one is sacred. That's really important. I mean, one of the problems we're facing at the moment is, so the Libs are terrible, right? Of course, and but so is the Labor Party. But they're so non-existent. I mean, I think partly because the Labor Party's stepped back and just gone, let's let this shit show go on, and we'll just stand by the side while we watch on. But you're sort of going, I wish the Labor Party, because on Facebook and things, people always sort of go, why don't you pay out the Labor Party more? And you're just going, well, we would if they were in power. And also, we would if they opened their mouth. Like, literally, the only jokes we've made about Anthony Albanese in the last year have been about how non-existent he is.
Has he done the right thing, though, by stepping back and just letting them fall over themselves, the Liberal Party?
Well, it depends what you mean by right thing, doesn't it? Like probably from a craven political perspective, yeah, like absolutely. From a comms perspective, absolutely, it's the right thing to do. Just let, if someone's killing themselves on stage, don't interrupt them. But from a leadership perspective, is it morally the right thing to do to sort of absent yourself from the political debate?
Because he did just go to ground once he became leader.
Yeah, he just went to ground. But also, I think he was really arrogant. I think the reason why he went to ground is because he thought that everyone knew who he was. His first speech, I don't know whether you remember, but when he got the leadership, he actually said, oh, I don't need to introduce myself because everyone knows me. You're going, that is so not true, mate. Like, I don't know. Like, I can name, like, all my friends who are into politics can name you. Anyone else, like my sister-in-law or my brother-in-law, or, you know, like, there's tons of people I know who would just go, Anthony Albanese, who? Like, is that a type of shoe? Like, I don't know. Like, is that a footballer? Like people don't know who some obscure shadow minister is, and then when they become opposition leader, they need to introduce themselves. But I think he's so existed in that sort of Canberra space for so long that he thinks because everyone in the halls of Parliament House go, oh, I know who that guy is. He sort of thinks the world knows who he is. So I think that was a huge error, him not sort of at least making a bit of a show and a dance about it. But I think in hindsight, you go, yeah, well played. Like, let Scott Morrison stuff it up for himself. Yeah, what a brilliant mastermind. What a masterstroke.
But do you think the spin doctors should be getting a little more aggressive, though, on the Labor side of the bench?
Well, I think, yeah, and I think you're starting to see that now. Like, I actually know the chief of staff there a little bit. His name's Tim Guttrell, and he did the Rudd election. He was the National Secretary of the Labor Party when Rudd got elected. And his whole thing would be about just holding your nerve. That, you know, electoral politics is not, you know, anything other than making your opponent stuff up and winning elections on the day. So you have to time it all. And that's why, you know, in the last few days, Anthony Albanese started sort of poking his head up and making some announcements. And it's like, oh, is there an election in 6 months? Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Because do you think that, though, by saying nothing, that's their best chance of getting in?
See, I don't. I mean, if you actually look at, say, history, rather than, you know, comms strategists from the Labor Party who all convinced themselves that they know what they're doing. If you look at history, the Labor Party has never gotten in with somebody who has a small target strategy. Everyone thinks that that's true, but it's not. If you look at it, you know, I mean, you can go back to Whitlam. Whitlam came in off the back of, you know, a huge social movement and had a huge agenda. Hawke was similarly a large figure who sort of had a huge agenda in terms of transforming and modernising the Australian economy. Rudd, similarly, you know, I mean, maybe you could say, you know, he didn't try to play a small target because Kim Beazley had made that mistake in about 15 billion elections before that. And the ironic small target strategy for Mr. Kim Beazley, the largest target you've ever seen in politics. But you know, Kevin Rudd came on the back of, you know, Your Rights at Work, which was actually a huge social movement, like the largest union mobilisation in 30 years. So it's sort of like, it's just wrong to say, like, you actually, like, I reckon people in this country vote Liberal by default and they need a reason to vote Labor. And that's the reason why, you know, this small target strategy doesn't work. You actually have to, I mean, I actually have a whole idea about what Labor Party, like, because I hate the Labor Party's current, have you seen what they're trying to run? They're trying to run this, you know, wherefore you, Scott Morrison is against you, right? That's their latest sort of thought
spin
bubble, right? And they're going to clearly run it into the election. Now, I've talked to Labor Party people and said, do you think that's a good idea? That sounds like a terrible sort of framework. And they, oh, no, it's worked in other places. Like, it worked in America, it worked in the UK. You know, it's a really good progressive frame, you know, blah, blah, blah. You're just going, well, hang on. Does America or Britain have compulsory voting? And you go, no, like, they don't. You go, so who's it convincing? It's convincing people who are already, or like, the politics of envy, the politics of wherefore they're against you, you know, blah blah blah, is entirely based on the politics of envy, which doesn't appeal to swinging voters. So the one type of person who in Australian politics you've got to convince the swinging voters are going to go, that's a terrible frame. Anyway, so.
Would you make a good politician? Would you like to run?
I would love to run. I want to run for my own party. I want the Chaser Party. And I think it should just be entirely only satirical, only satirical promises. That would be my goal. It's just like literally, we just fuck shit up would be the slogan.
Go and say and do nothing and get across the line doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, no. It would be the huge target strategy where we just go. We're going to tax the mining companies. We're going to tax all the evil big corporations. We're going to tax Facebook and Google out of existence. And we'll have tons of money, and we'll spread it all around. We'll just give it to everyone. It'd be great.
When did you first get involved and interested in politics?
I was in the Labor Party for a few years, much to my shame, when I was at uni. Actually, when I was at high school. Well, I think I've always been interested in politics. I used to listen to right-wing shock jocks as my going to bed noise from about the age of 12. I would listen to late-night right-wing shock jocks as my hobby.
Who was your favourite?
Which I loved. I thought that what they were saying was great. I was such a mixed up little child. It was the YouTube of the late 1980s, I suppose. It was Brian Wilshire and all those people. But no, and then I joined the Labor Party for a few years in when I was a teenager in Young Labor, and actually Anthony Albanese was like. Picked me up from my home, and he drove me to my first Young Labor party meeting back in, it would have been 1989 it would have been. Yeah. Wow. And that's when, and Young Labor back then, for all its faults, actually was a really good little organisation, because we did things like, we brought out Crowded House from New Zealand, and we held a fundraiser. And it just did this, pissy little theatre. It would have been like 300 or 400 of us. But we got Crowded House there, and they were the act. It was like, this is pretty good sort of concert to put on as a Young Labor fundraiser. What else did we do? We brought out Billy Bragg.
Wow.
He obviously had come out for something else, but we managed to get him. And I remember we went to dinner with Billy Bragg after he'd done a concert for us. He was sitting there, Chinese, going, this is incredible. He was telling stories about overthrowing Thatcher and protesting against Thatcher. So that was a lot of fun. But then by the time I sort of, like, it was when by about second year in university, I realized just how terrible all those sorts of student politicians were, and that's actually when I sort of really got into student media, and we had control of the student newspaper, and that's when we did our first real chaser style newspaper. So we would just mock all the student politicians who are now, I might say, all the people who run Australia and everything like that. Like, and the thing is, you realise, they haven't changed at all. They're the same dickwads that they were, and morons. Like, the only people who get involved in student politics are the people who can't have sex and, can't get sex. And so they join student politics sort of thing. You just go, that's why you're all such creepy morons. That's who got involved in student politics. So.
But you were still doing it back in your Sydney grammar days. You were into comedy back then and running the student newspaper back then.
Yeah, that's right. Well, me and Dom and Chaz, all of whom ended up in the Chaser, we had, there was a publication, our school newspaper was called Tiger, and Dom edited it, and I used to write various columns for it. And it was great. We won an award from the Daily Telegraph for it. We went to go in and see how the Daily Telegraph was. And then they actually ran one of our papers in the Daily Telegraph.
Wow.
It was 4 pages of it. But they didn't put in any of like our funny stuff, and it was like, hang on, like the whole reason because it was a really successful publication. We used to because it was a sort of scam in a way because we'd put out these huge magazines that were like 90 pages long on A4 paper, and we'd say to the teacher, "Oh, can you photocopy 600 copies of these?" And so it would have cost thousands of dollars to photocopy these wonderful student newspapers. But then we just sold them for 20 cents and pocketed the money. And you're just going, there was no like it was just completely uneconomic thing. But it was fun. It was just a wonderful time, and it was very popular. Like we would constantly sell out our thing. It was good days, good times. Yes.
Well, because you were saying that you were sort of at the back of the classroom in the early days, still making kids laugh. What was the sort of comedy that you were using in those days? What made them laugh, and what made you laugh back then?
Well, it's always been satire. Like I remember, we had this ancient history class, and there was this guy in the class who never, ever put in his essays on time. Right, and we were learning about ancient Greece, right, which is already ripe for comedy because it's all about, like they're all gay, and you're going to an all boys school, and you just, like it's very, ribald humor, right? But so anyway, I mean, and not that there's any funny about being gay, but when you're a 14-year-old boy, you sort of, and they're all in the Theban sacred band. I don't know whether you remember, but. So the whole thing is that Sparta was very, very dominant as a military force. But then these people in Thebes, which was nearby, came up with this innovation, which is that they made their sticks a lot longer, and they were all lovers. Like you could only get into the army if you and your lover also got into the army, and they'd stand there. One of them would hold a protective shield, and the other one would hold this incredibly long pike that would stick out, and and they made their pikes a bit longer than everyone else's. And it was, I mean, just imagine that was so ripe for comedy because it's like, oh, no one can penetrate the Theban sacred band with their long pikes. Anyway, point is, we had this kid who never put his essay in on time. So we wrote him an essay with all this sort of double entendre in the essay. And so on the day it was due, it was like for the term, it was the term paper. We said to Scott, hey, mate, have you handed in your essay? And it's like, no, I don't have an essay. And he said, why don't you hand in this essay? We've written one for you. And he handed it in. And then we asked the teacher, hey, did Scott hand in an essay this time? That's amazing. Like he never hands his essay in on time. Do you want to just read it? And so she started reading it out to the class, and it was my finest hour because it was it was satire, but done on the world's nerdiest scale. So it's good.
What was the reaction?
It was great. And in actual fact, I found out years later that essay had been photocopied, and like it was the way that the teachers had been introducing that course thereafter, because it was a sort of funny introduction to, military strategy in ancient Greece.
Do you think that more humour should be used in education?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I think it has actually improved since our day because even just we did this series of sketches last year called War on 2020, and the number of teachers who've emailed us saying, "Oh, we're using this sketch in class," and I'm going, "Copyright!" No. And or that sketch or whatever. I think that. Because of the internet, like teachers are on the lookout for, accessible material that sort of helps kids sort of thing. So I imagine it's being used more, but it is absolutely true. My mum was a teacher for a while, and she always just used to say, like, if ever her class she taught history, if ever her class got too rowdy, she would just lower her voice and start talking about the sex lives of royals. Like, and and it's the same thing. Sex and comedy just immediately, like, if you're of a certain age, it's just like you just completely, it gets through to you. So yeah, it's good.
Did you enjoy your private school education?
Yeah, I did. I went in. My parents weren't rich, but my dad had a terrible experience at his public school, and when I got to and I was a bit of a fragile little being, or my parents thought I was fragile. I don't think I was fragile, but so they sort of went, "Oh, well, we'll put you into this school." So I ended it going, well, I've got to get 100% value for money out of this, and because it was the most resource. I mean, it's just extraordinary. It's so unfair. But my attitude was, well, I'm here, might as well use them. My attitude is everyone should have an education as good as mine, rather than like nobody should have an education like that. And we had things like, I mean, it was just incredible. We had this AV department, right, where the school, they wired up the whole school to have certain channels. So you had 8 channels, and the AV department would play, instead of having VCRs in every room, you'd just ring up the AV department and they'd play the video centrally. And that means that several classrooms could all show the same thing, because you just switch it to that channel in the school. It's like an internal TV network. So we went, that is great. There's a TV network that we can take over at lunchtimes and run our own TV show. And so we set up this thing called SGS News, and I was the host, and we would do a sort of satirical news show at lunchtimes. And we used to, every time it was on, the teachers would say, because you weren't supposed to be inside at lunchtimes, but they'd make an exception for whenever SGS News was on, and it would clear the playground. We claimed ratings of 100%. And it was great, because you just... I realised later in life, though, that... Because I went to the funeral of one of my friends who was involved in it, and he died early last year because of the bushfires, actually. He had an asthma attack in that terrible bushfires at the beginning of last year. And... But I realised that actually, I mean, he was my comic foil in a way. He was the straight man. But the amount of bullying I put him through, like on screen, live in front of the whole school, like it was the bully pulpit, like nothing else. So it's always made me sort of empathise with why Alan Jones and Steve Price and all those cockheads are such cockheads, because you go, the power is so great.
Do you think they're losing their power, though, with the way things are changing, like podcasts? Do you think that these shock jocks are losing their reign?
I don't know whether... I mean, I think media is transforming, right? So, I mean, I think one of the misnomers in this country is that we think of News Corp as being a media organisation, when a more accurate thing to say is that it's a political organisation that masquerades as a media organisation. So, I think what I think is really interesting is that Sky News, for example, because its actual mission is not to make money, but to peddle influence and to peddle really quite extreme right-wing ideas, it is adapting much quicker than conventional media companies. Like, Channel 7, Channel 9, they're not really on YouTube. They're not really where audiences are. Like, it's not like people aren't consuming media. People are consuming more media than ever, but they're just not consuming it down the conventional pipes, right? But Sky News is the biggest YouTuber in Australia. Like it has the most YouTube subscribers of any YouTuber in Australia.
Wow.
So they're and same with their Instagram and their Facebook. Their Facebook videos are often the most shared Facebook videos each week. They're sort of actually not losing their power at all. And even though everyone looks at the TV ratings of Sky News and goes, "Oh well, who cares? What a joke." You're going, actually, no. People are getting their insidiously getting their news from Sky News anyway, and these awful people who just lie, but, because they're sort of finding them in the places that they're actually browsing media.
Where do you get your news from?
Oh, Sky News. Yeah, absolutely. it's the top satirical news service in the country. Yeah, I mean, their satire, and some of those characters, such comedy characters. Alan Jones, what a great comedy character. Sort of best comedy character since Norman Gunston, I reckon.
Look, when I was working at 2UE, I remember that everyone had their favourite Alan Jones impersonation. And they'd walk down the hallway and be doing, yeah, what about the people on Struggle Street? What about them? When you're researching, do you watch a lot of television?
No, I make the interns do that because, in fact, like I had to, like a couple of weeks ago, we were doing a piece on Sky News, and this poor guy, Lachlan's his name. I made him just watch Sky News for a week because it's so awful. I don't know about you, but it makes me so anxious and angry whenever I watch that stuff, and not in the way that I think they intend. Like they want you to feel angry about welfare cheats ripping you off, whatever. Just angry that these people are allowed to lie so blatantly, especially during COVID, where they essentially had a case line that was pro-death. It was like, well, Victoria's in lockdown. We believe that freedom's more important than people dying. It doesn't matter, and you look where Murdoch's influence is more palpable, like the US and the UK, and it was a pro-death position. That sort of Trumpian anti-expert position was just awful. So yeah, no, I don't watch TV. I mean, the way I keep up to date with my news services is I love Twitter. I mean, it's a shit show, but it distills everything so well. I think Reddit is an amazing community builder, although I must note that I think only men read Reddit. It's extraordinarily skewed gender-wise. And then I don't even touch Facebook. Do you have Facebook anymore? Does anyone?
No.
Yeah.
Try and
but
stay
the
away
numbers
from it.
are. But the numbers are that's where people predominantly get their information. It's extraordinary, its reach, given I don't know anyone who admits to using Facebook anymore, even though you then go, well, hang on, how come the only place I can sell tickets to a live show or something is through Facebook? Like everyone uses it. Fuck off.
When you're actually doing research, where's the best place to look?
Well, you gotta. I'd start on Twitter, because if you're up with Twitter and you curate your feed, you're often about 2 days ahead of a news cycle. Like you can sort of that combined with Reddit. If you subscribe to the right subreddits, I don't know. Do you use Reddit much?
Not at all.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's a bit nerdy and weird, but there are some great communities who are just in the know about what's going on. So if you can find the right subreddit for whatever news is breaking, you sort of go, oh, I'm an engineer on the Ever Given. Ask me anything, and then you find an interview with somebody who's literally there, because I think Reddit now has about 300 million users a day or something like that.
Really?
So, yeah, and it does, span the globe. So your chances of, stumbling across an actual first-hand account that is credible and quite detailed is immensely high. Like it's a really good way of understanding, like having a deep dive into whatever's going on.
Did Donald Trump change the news cycle and the way it's approached and monitored?
Yeah, it's interesting. And one thing that happened immediately after Trump left was, I don't know whether you found this, but that it slowed down. The actual news cycle for, like you weren't waking up going, what's the gag this morning? Oh, wait a minute. By the afternoon, it's a completely different story and there's a different thing. Like it was so chaotic the way he sort of just threw. Like, I mean, he was the first. He invented the idea of cancelling out one scandal by having an even bigger scandal, to cancel it out, and then an even bigger scandal on that. And Scott Morrison actually started trying that in March, where because he's had 5 shocking weeks in a row. But he remember about halfway through, the Christian Porter stuff had been dragging on for about 10 days. And so, and it was reaching the Friday, and he clearly wanted to sort of change the topic of conversation. So he brought forward the results of the Aged Care Royal Commission, which were damning. Like, it was a total shit show. And he went, oh, no, look at this over here. Look at this scandal that we've overseen. Just to try and get rid of Christian Porter off the front pages. Like, it's extraordinary. The other thing that's really changed about the media cycle very recently, like I would say in the last year, is that Friday afternoon used to be when you put out the garbage and you hid things on Friday afternoon. And now, if you want something to really stick around for 3 or 4 days and actually seep into people's consciousness, you put it out on Friday afternoon. And because all the newsrooms are defunded and everything like that, it suddenly becomes the story on Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night. And it's only when people start, on Monday morning that any other news happens. So, and I've noticed that they've stopped trying to hide things and they start actually putting big news announcements on Friday afternoons now. So, and I'm sure that social media, like even our internal like traffic numbers are now. I mean, there used to be a huge drop off at about 4 p.m., 5 p.m. on Fridays, and then they wouldn't pick up until Monday. And now there's always a drop. Like we have a huge Friday always. It's always our biggest day. People are relaxing and sort of thing. And then by about 4 p.m., 5 p.m., people are obviously getting pissed. They stop looking at their phones so much and our traffic goes down. But then now what happens is by about 7 or 8, people are obviously getting home from the pub, whatever, and logging back on, which didn't happen before the pandemic. I don't know quite what's happened. And then we always have a huge Friday night, which never used to happen. So I think people are replacing movies and TV with online browsing and stuff or something like that. And news is part of that mix. Sort of interesting.
Do you worry about traffic? Do you worry about numbers?
Not day to day at all. Like I used to. Like I reckon a couple of years ago, when our business model was less robust, you'd really want to drive that traffic to make up ad numbers, but our ad numbers, I mean, our ad revenue has been falling as a proportion of our revenue for years, and it's sort of now almost immaterial. And so it doesn't actually matter. It's more about engagement. And I think what we're focusing on is, of course, you want jokes to go viral and things like that, but you also just want to be in the moment of the joke, like to be really hyper topical and to be there as a story's breaking and unfolding and to be doing the jokes in real time. I think that's a more satisfying model. And it also means you get more credit for it because you sort of, you're coming up with the gags as the whole story's breaking. Like it's just a cleverer model. And that means that actually there's sort of now 2 shifts in our newsroom, which is because I'm old and have kids, and I tend to do the day shift, like where get up and commission a few stories and get them out during the day. And then Cam, who's the official editor of the Chaser now, essentially because he's young and has the weirdest hours in the world, tends to do a sort of night shift where he'll go right into the night telling jokes. And it's just great to see, so like we sort of almost got an 18-hour a day newsroom happening, which is great.
I couldn't get over the fact that you even found humour in the Suez, the boat controversy when it got stuck in there, stopping the boats. The fact that I just went, wow, you guys are on the ball.
Yeah. Well, but that was the funniest story of the year, wasn't it? I loved that story. That was the best story because it was so simple as well. And I don't know whether you saw all the Matthew Bevan, who is on RN. Do you see him on Twitter? Because he was just going, I just think you should just push it. You just push it on this side, and it was wonderful because, like you just look at it and you go, oh, surely that's fairly. It doesn't even look that stuck, But then but then there's this education in, oh my God, this boat is 400 meters long. Like this is like I sort of didn't even know that global capitalism was so immense. It was a perfect. And then of course it totally fitted in with Scott Morrison's woes and everything like that. Like it was a perfect metaphor in a way as well.
It was. Now, also, some of the ones that I've looked at recently, the Royals are giving you plenty of fodder at the moment, and they continue to do. What's your favourite part of the Royal whole experience?
Well, my favourite headline of all time in the Chaser was when the Queen Mum died. And I think she was 101 or something. Remember, she was very old. And we ran with this lovely commemorative cover that was, and it read, "A life cut tragically short."
Because you're having a lot of fun with Prince Philip at the moment as well.
Oh yes, what a character! And the good thing is, he's a proper enemy. You're allowed to take the piss out of him because not only is he rich and entitled and everything, he's also hilariously racist. And so, even though he is a little old, and it is true, Cam, there were a few gags that Cam, because Cam, even though Cam is sort of half my age, he's twice as sensible as me, and there are a few gags where Cam went, "No, we're not running that. That's too making fun of death or so we don't think it's funny that people die, but I don't think he is going to die. He's a royal. He's got at least another. Have you seen him? He looks he looks the full picture of health. I think he's got another 20 years left in him. He's probably just sitting there going, "Kill me now, kill me."
No, he's still making it. So let's get back to the early days with the studying arts and political science. What took you down that road? You obviously were a big fan of comedy. Why politics?
Yeah, so I think, well, my parents were always quite political. Like, we, went on peace marches and stuff like that when I was young, and I always loved, I always just thought it was so sensible that you shouldn't have nuclear bombs and you should have peace, and I thought that was it was such a beautiful movement, and it was such a great community because it wasn't just because we had some huge rallies in Sydney when I was young with the peace movement, and it was such a joyous time because you go on these rallies and you'd see like half your teachers would turn up, and like it was a real community event, and we were involved in various churches back then, and all the churches would turn up, and like it wasn't this sort of nasty, ranty protest. It was sort of a cultural thing as much as anything. And then you'd sit in at the Domain, and there'd be lots of music and lots of great food from all around the world. It was just such a joyous sort of thing. So I think that sort of utopian politics just gave me joy. And then I just think it's really important. We're so rich and we're so privileged in this country, and I am so privileged as a person. Like, I'm a white man, that I sort of feel it's like our responsibility to leave the earth better than when we got it. Like we should we have a responsibility to use all the privilege that we have to make the world a better place. So, and the way to do that is through politics. And I think, and to think deeply about what politics is. It's not just, electoral politics. It's about, in fact, I would say that exists at the end of the process. It's more about convincing people and laying seeds of doubt in the powerful and the rich and stuff like that, and actually sort of undermining the powerful and giving voice to the dispossessed, all that sort of stuff. I think comedy's a perfect place for that to exist. So um, I think that's I don't know how far we've got, but I kind of feel like, the comedy stuff allowed me to master the craft. And now, we've got this other website that we've started called The Shot. And it's only been going for about 9 months, but it's got a more political and more, it's just commentary, really, more serious bend. And, and just actually, I sort of feel like the sort of sharpness that I learned in comedy is is equally applicable to serious commentary, because actually, if you keep your audience entertained and you actually apply genuine craft to it, you can really make a potent point about things and actually have political influence. So that's the theory, anyway.
How difficult is it to always be coming up with funny lines and comedy and, yeah, basically being a satirist?
I reckon used to find it a lot harder than I do now, and I reckon part of the reason is because now it's more just about making yourself laugh, and like I it's more. I mean, we've got more people in the office nowadays, so maybe that makes it easier. But it's actually a lot of the time, it's just how do you make the rest of the people in the office laugh? Oh, that's the gag. Okay, great. And the method that we've always had to sort of work out how to um, make things funny, if you're sort of struggling for an idea, is to sort of ask yourself, well, what is actually the point? What is the essential outrage of what's going on? And there's always comedy in that, because if something's outrageous, or if you can actually identify the thing that's really bugging you and making you angry, then that's an emotional response. You can actually find the comedy in that moment. So I think a lot of I mean, comedy is entirely about trial and error. Like, I can't tell you, like, our best writer at the moment is this guy called John Delmenico. And, he will pitch 12, 14 articles a day, and we'll run two or three of the, 14 ideas, he doesn't write them all up. But, that is the right ratio. One or two out of 14, 15 ideas means that, like, because actually, you're better off having 10 terrible ideas, but actually having 10 ideas than, like, the worst thing for comedy is to sort of tighten up your brain and not allow yourself to think laterally and widely, because it's always the 11th idea that's better than the other 10.
So, what do you prefer, sort of what you're doing now with a web based format, or television, or that sort of performance?
Well, actually, I much prefer this. I prefer this, I'd say, with the caveat of I really do love doing video. And I mean, that's why the War on 2020 project was such a wonderful project, because it was online, but involved, shooting proper production values, sketches with proper production values. I think what this model allows is for so much more control. You don't actually have to go back and ask some bureaucrat or some manager permission to run a gag, or like, there's no, we're in charge, and we can push the boundaries so much further than we otherwise would be able to. That said, um, the joy of video production and television production is wonderful, and I remain hopeful that, like, Screen Australia were extremely generous in the way because we originally had a television partner for that project, and they ended up sort of suggesting that maybe it it would be better as an online only production, and I think it was. I think we reached more people. We reached over 11 million people with those sketches. And you just go, that's figures that no television station can ever achieve. Like, and whacking, like putting it into some, TV networks straitjacket of how they distribute actually would have just destroyed that project. So what I'm hopeful about is being able to sort of keep it in this digital realm, but actually, start doing proper long form video projects, but not necessarily using conventional networks to distribute. Although I would say, I think they can act as residual networks. Like, almost, it's the opposite model to what exists today, which is, I think every project that I do going forward will be online first, and then, if we can fob it off onto some television network, that's great.
That's just the
But they can have the second run. Yeah, they can have the second run at it. That's to get reach for old people who don't have the internet or something. I don't know.
Do you think, though, that television is dying, though, as a medium because the internet is taking over, as you say, 11 million people?
It's not dying. Television stations are dying. Free-to-air television stations are dying. Like, their business models are evaporating. But television itself is not dying at all. We're actually watching more television than ever before. And that's because Netflix and Stan and Prime and all those ones are coming in over the top. And that's a really good thing. I think that's an excellent thing for television. It means it's better funded. I think, and I think, I think the free-to-air businesses are like any Australian capitalists, where they'll just end up legislating that that they have to have a role in all this anyway. But the pity is that, because ABC iView is actually, I think, still the number one streaming service in Australia, or at least it was 12 months ago. Maybe Netflix is more now. But, until very recently, iView had this 10-year head start on everywhere else. It was an extraordinarily good service, but it was so underfunded. I mean, I remember being in there a few years ago, and they were saying, "Oh, well, we're not gonna go to HD yet." And I go, "Why not? You put everything on HD, you idiots! Like, everyone, that's what people want, right?" And they're going, "Oh yeah, but this cost of streaming is like millions of dollars. The actual bandwidth costs." Cost too much, and you're going, oh my god, this is so frustrating. Like, because they're so constrained by what they're allowed to do, because they get so little money that they don't they really can't exploit the wonderful position that they had. So let's just hope that there's a shift in the winds on how the ABC is viewed, and we can get some proper funding for it, or even, maybe we do have to look at the ability for the ABC to go, okay, well, if you want to get HD, you can pay $5 a month extra, and allowing it to have some independent revenue. Not that would work, of course, because then the government would just cut their funding further anyway.
So how did you guys get picked up by the ABC in the first place?
Oh, they were idiots. They were no. It was Andrew Denton. It was entirely Andrew Denton. So we'd been publishing. This is true. Been publishing a newspaper for about 18 months, Chaser, and he sent us this postcard, this really lovely postcard saying, "Love your work. Call me if you ever want to do anything, like a project or something." And we went, "Oh, that's a nice postcard. Oh, isn't that? He's a fan. Isn't that lovely? We'll file that away." And we didn't call him, right? And then so several months later, he rang up and went, "Look, do you want to do a project or not?" It's like, "Oh, you wanted us to call you? Okay, well." And so we sat down. We had these lovely chats in a cafe just around the corner. And then he basically leveraged, to his credit, the ABC wanted him to do an interview show, and he went, well, I'll do an interview show, but you've got to put these young guns also on air and give me
Wow.
a show, and I'll do your interview show. So he literally used all his own credibility and power in that space to get us up, which was just, it was the career. I mean, it was just such a wonderful career starter. And then he really taught us how to do TV properly. So, he's a tireless worker. Like, he's almost like grinds you to the ground, genius. But actually, that gave us this wonderful grounding in how to convert our very lengthy sort of undergraduate prose into something that actually, could work on television.
What was the biggest thing you learnt to convert it over?
Tight is right. Denton was a very good teacher. Like, he had all these rules. So tight is right is probably the key, especially television comedy thing, which is, economy is the soul of, what is it? Brevity is the soul of wit, is the Oscar Wilde way of saying it. But, if you can shorten something, I mean, often on TV, brevity, you don't even need any words. You can just convey it with a visual or a look or a glance or a harumph or whatever. So that's good. The other ones are rule of three. Comedy works in threes. So, you look for your premise, your advance, and then your twist. And, if something is struggling to work when you're reading it off the page, it's probably because you haven't, like, if you've got four ideas, actually being ruthless and cutting it down to three ideas, or, actually applying a rule of three relentlessly just makes it snap along so much faster. What else? There are a few other things. They're the two. Oh, and no, I mean, they're the two main ones that he taught us. That he just drummed into us relentlessly, and so we could barely write a script to begin with. Like, none of us had properly written television before, but by the end, by the time he went off and we went our separate ways, we were proper television writers. It was fantastic.
Did you realise the opportunity that you had when it came up?
No, I think we. Oh no, I think we realised that it was a great opportunity. I think we probably were also unbelievably annoying and arrogant about it. Like, I think we very quickly went, well, this is our birthright, isn't it? Being on TV, So I can imagine, like, I think, although actually we've all remained, all the crew, like the whole production staff from those early television shows, when I catch up with all the time and have beers and reminisce and everything. So, I mean, maybe we weren't as arrogant. Maybe only some of us were arrogant. Who knows?
Do you have a favourite sketch from those days?
I mean, every sketch. My favourite episode ever of any of our shows was this one. I think it was, Craig did a lot of the work. I can't remember whether it was Craig's initial idea, but it was called Lunchgate. And actually, it was the first time that Andrew and I pieced it together, I think, quite a lot. Although I think Chris also had a huge hand in it as well. But it was CNNNN. It was the season 2 of CNNNN, and we'd started realizing that actually we could piece together a whole narrative arc, but within the format of a TV news show. And so we just sourced at great expense. We got these videos of car crashes and car chases in the US, and we stitched together a narrative where we had this sort of half hour of you joining us live as as the chaser helicopter is on a car chase, tracking a car chase, and it was all just about this man who had left his house without taking his lunch, and his wife was chasing after him to try and give him his lunch, and then it turned into this whole narrative. But it was all done through a news sort of thing, and it was just such a clever way to sort of parody all those news forms. It was pure parody, but it was sustained across half an hour. And of course, with all this sort of slapstick footage of these genuine car crashes and things happening on the roads that we'd licensed, it just gave it this sort of, it just made it look like it was a real news show. It was amazing.
Because my favourite sketch that you guys had, of course, the Osama bin Laden.
Oh, yes, the apex stunt. Yes.
That was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. How did you come up with it in the first place?
Well, actually, the person who came up with the idea was a series producer, Andy Neal. And look, I think, and to be honest, I was in the US still at the time, so I was not privy to a lot of the conversations that happened. But the as I understand it, they knew, they knew they wanted to do something big, and they were sitting around, and you'd have these long meetings that lasted, hours trying to figure out a good stunt idea and things like that. And then it just struck Andy at some point. And Andy is this genius. He's originally from Queensland, and he did all the Denton shows in the 1990s, and he was the guy. He was the head of Triple J when it was Double J, and then he converted it into Triple J and took it national and things like that. It's extraordinary. He's a sort of legend of the industry. And he just said, hang on, how about if we, pretended to be part of the motorcade, sourced the limousine and went through. And it was like, that's it. That is it. And then it was like, and we can get Chaz shot by dressing him up as Osama bin Laden. Yes! That's it. So they were it was two separate ideas that sort of came together in that one meeting. So that's good.
Were they surprised how far it went?
Yeah. Well, it was a mistake. Like, they had intended to turn back before that, but then it was the police because the day before there'd been some hold up, and so the police were under instructions to just wave through any obvious motorcade people, and so they got waved through without any credential checking. Which is actually, so it led to this thing where they were deep in the heart of the illegal zone before they just went, oh shit, we're going to turn around. So that's when they got out.
Okay, so just to wrap things up then. So where to from here then?
Look, I've got huge plans. There's a couple of TV ideas or video ideas is what I'd call them, that I'm testing out. And one of my realizations is actually when you've got a newsroom like the Chasers, we don't necessarily need to attach it to a TV show. We can actually build up the skills by releasing weekly videos. So that's what I want to do this year is start releasing weekly television production style videos. And then we might end up packaging it up into a TV show towards the end of this year or maybe early next year. And then the other thing that I've always wanted to get into is narrative comedy. So watch this space on that because I've got a really good idea, but it's just a matter of that sort of style of production is very expensive. So we've just got to work out how to finance it, basically.
Thechaser.com.au is your website. And what else can you do with it? You're really you're exploring boundaries as it is. Is there other things that you want to do with it?
Yeah. So we're in the process. This is all very off the record. Please don't tell anyone. But we are looking at setting up a couple of websites in the US and actually having a similar sort of Chaser style sensibility on an American satire sort of platform. So that would be very interesting. And similarly with The Shot, which has become extremely successful, the sister publication, I think that we have global ambitions for that as well. So it'll be interesting. It's a really, in terms of the roadmap for what we're doing, is the next 12 months is going to be very... Just watch this space, I'd say. Watch this space.
Because you've written the book, The American Hoax.
Yes.
So are the Americans ready for this sort of satire? Because you have a real understanding of the American market.
Yeah, look, I think we do. And there's some great people over in America who I mean, there's a huge gap in the American market at the moment, which they call satirical. It's not quite what we would call. It sort of falls between what Chaser and The Shot are doing here, because Gawker was their big, what they would call satirical website, and it got sued into oblivion by one of the directors of Facebook, Peter Thiel, a few years ago, and that sent a chill through that style of commentary in the US. And so you don't really have something like the Chaser over there. So I think there's a huge gap, and yeah, sure, we may get sued into oblivion, but my God, that would be fun.
Look forward to hearing more from you. So thanks so much, Charles Firth. Thanks for joining us over the bonnet.
Thanks, Mark.